The Hyundai Palisade got an upgrade for the 2023 model year, and this thing looks really, really sharp. Now, this one probably looks slightly different than some of the other Palisades that you've seen on the road. And the reason why is because this one is the new urban trim level that's available exclusively in Canada. It looks really sharp. There are a few changes from the 22 to the 23 model. If we look at the front end of the vehicle, it looks a little bit more like the redesigned Tucson. It's got this mean looking grille. Now, in the US, we've got 5 trim levels, so one was added on, and that's the new XRT trim level. In Canada, we lost the luxury, but we gained the urban. It's more loaded than last year's model though, which is kind of nice. But starting off, taking a peek at these beefy 20-inch tires. But the rim is where things pop that little bit more. And I love that blacked out look that you're gonna find inside of the urban trim level of this vehicle. It just pops, it makes it look really sharp. Now, if you're in the States, you want a blacked out rim, you could always do something aftermarket, look at hydro dipping and things like that to give it a little bit more of a unique look. But looking at all of our body moldings and rockers and things like that, whether it's body color or this style is going to depend on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. Looking at the tires in general, 18-inch tires in the lower trims, pretty much going to be 20-inch tires across the board otherwise though, but it is really, really nice. We are looking at all-wheel drive inside of this thing on top of that, so it is really good performance that you get. But I mentioned it earlier, looking at the newly redesigned front end of this thing, it looks really sharp. Like, oh, I just want to rub my hand all over this grill right now. It looks really nice. And I did mention it, it is very similar to the upgraded Tucson that we got in the 2022 model year. So just creating more symmetry throughout the brand, but I love it. We've got this gorgeous blacked out grille inside of the urban trim level, with it looking slightly different in the majority of the trims on top of that, but it is really nice. We do have our blacked out Hyundai badge in the very front, a front facing camera, side view mounted cameras, and a backup camera. So this thing has a full surround view monitor, so full 360 camera. The side view cameras are actually really cool too, because we've got the option for a blind view monitor, which means that we can see what's going on in our blind spot left and right in the cluster screen. It is beautiful. But you might just be able to make it out. We do have our forward sensing system, which is fantastic. Right in the middle there, we're just gonna flip it off to the left, and then using the force, we've got our hood, which is on hydraulics, fantastic. But we've got this, the 3.8 liter 6-cylinder engine, pushes out 291 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque. So it does take on quite a few competitors that are in the same space performance-wise. Not a turbocharged engine, it's naturally aspirated, which means it has a good amount of power. But as always, we've got easy access to top up fluids, we can easily change your oil, easy access to the battery off to the right-hand side. One thing you definitely want to make sure you're doing though is maintaining your vehicle. A few different reasons. So you want to make sure that maintaining your vehicle, you maintain your manufacturer's warranty, because if you miss your regularly scheduled maintenance, something goes wrong, Hyundai could technically deny any claims that happen because you're not keeping up your end of the buyer's agreement. So just make sure, follow the regular maintenance schedule, make sure you're breaking the vehicle in for the first, I believe it's 800 or 1,000 kilometers. We're looking at what, about 600 miles or so for that break-in period. But I mean, overall, styling-wise, this is great. We've got a heat shield over top, and then this nice engine cover, which has kind of like it's like a faux carbon fibery type of look there, which is kind of nice. GDI badge in the very middle, but it looks pretty sharp. All right, taking a peek along our driver's side door. So we do have this little icon there. So that's gonna highlight red when somebody's entered the blind spot on either side of the vehicle. Taking a peek underneath, we also do have our little camera there. So side view mounted camera. Very, very useful because it also is going to show our blind spot right inside of our cluster screen. Along the outside of the vehicle there, so we've got this nice kind of chrome look on the outside. We've got this button here, so we can push that in order to be able to lock the doors if we want to. We can also press if we want to be able to unlock. And hopping inside, really nice look. So we've got this nice metallic look right along the door itself, following right up into our driver's seat memory, which is fantastic. We'll get to that in a second. But along the side here, you can see we've got this nice metallic highlight down below. We can adjust what's going on with our side view mirrors. We can also unlock and lock our window control and kill off power to those rear windows. Tiny little handle there along the side. A little bit of storage down below there on top of that. And then hopping inside. So we've got this nice looking Palisade badge right along the scuff plate there. We've got seats that are adjustable a few different ways, and it's going to depend on the trim level of the vehicle that you're in. So this one essentially is fully loaded. So we've got seats that four-way adjustable for our lumbar support, so we can go up, down with it, etc. We can adjust our backrest there. We can go forwards, backwards, up and down with the seat itself. And then we also have this button, which, watch this, we can control the actual leg cushions inside of this too. Now, one other option is that inside of the calligraphy trim level, we can also get massage chair, driver's seat, which is fantastic. Moving on the inside there, series of different buttons that are available. So these ones here are going to adjust what's going on with our cluster screen, so we can adjust the brightness there. We've got our tow mode, traction control, we can open and close our liftgate, and then we've also got our electronic parking brake. Along the side, we also do have a manual telescoping steering wheel. So that's going to be the same way across the entire Palisade lineup. So we just crank down, adjust as necessary, and we're good to go. Ooh. All right, this is nice. This is really nice. All right, I love the seat. The seat is super comfortable inside of this thing. I did mention it, we've got multi-way adjustable seats, so it's going to depend on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. But the interior of this thing looks absolutely phenomenal. I love it. We've got this nice looking metallic highlight that follows all the way through at the dash. It also follows down through at the center stack too. It's going to look slightly different depending on which trim level of the vehicle you're in. And that's going to be the same across the entire Palisade lineup. So you'll get different types of highlights and things like that depending on the trim of the vehicle that you're in. But this is really, really sharp. We've got an upgraded speaker system inside of this, so a nice Harman Kardon sound system. We've got that badge along the door there, which again, looks really sharp. You just got to create a cross breeze. It's getting hot, but I love the new look. This is really sharp. Oh, I love it. Fully digital cluster screen, fully digital media screen that supports Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, etc. Now let's go through some basics of the steering wheel and cluster. We've got stick on the left-hand side that's going to let us control our running lamps, stick on the right side that's going to let us control our front and our rear windshield wiper. We've got paddle shifters inside this thing, a voice assistant, we can control our audio along the side. We've got our smart cruise control system, so that's essentially our adaptive cruise, so a set it and forget it cruise control. You set it at, let's say, 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, car in front of you slows down, yours is going to brake. They change lanes, pick up speed, it's going to pick you back up to your set speed again. It is a brilliant system. And then we've also got our lane follow assist, and that's going to keep us perfectly balanced in our lane as we go. It's not fully self-driving because you technically need to have your hands on the steering wheel, but it is a really good indication of how close we're getting to get there. But I love all the small highlights in the steering wheel. The metallic along the middle and the inside there looks fantastic. Our Hyundai badge right along the very middle too. Now we are going to be push button start inside of the vehicle. When we do our base push button without hitting the brake, it turns us into accessory mode. And what that means is that it turns on the majority of the vehicle just without firing up the engine. So we do have that as an option. You're at, let's say, I don't know, maybe you're going to a drive-in. You can turn into accessory mode as necessary there too. But so many cool things to cover off here. Like, it is really, really nice. Oh, I love that cluster. Oh, I love that digital cluster screen. And the startup screen's animations look really sharp. All right, and as we start to move down, so a few other things to point out. I did mention, so we've got a ton of different buttons that are available there. We've got our volume rocker there. Really, really great song. The artist is incredible, but the sound inside of it is even better. And that's because this one has the upgraded Harman Kardon sound system. We've got a series of different options for our climate control settings there, so we can adjust what's going on driver passenger side if we want to. We've got our rear climate control, our front climate control that we can adjust here as well. Do we want to adjust our fan speed? And that's for the front, or we can adjust it out for the rear as well. Do we want it going to the windshield facer feet for the rear? And when it's like this, windshield facer feet for the first row. We can have air circulation, rear defroster, And then as we move down from there, a series of other options. So let's lower you a little bit there. And down we go. All right. So we've got our park reverse neutral drive mode as well. Really, really straightforward. With the auto hold setting, what that setting does is if we go drive and we've got auto hold on, we can take our foot completely off the brake, and you can hear it going because there's an obstacle in front of me, but the car's not moving, and that's because of this incredible auto hold setting. So what it's going to do is fully keep the vehicle in place when we have our foot off the brake and we've come to a complete stop, which is phenomenal. Off to the side, we've also got this selector switch that lets us jump between different drive modes. So we've got our comfort mode, eco, sport, and smart mode. And then each mode is going to adjust what's going on with the cluster screen as well. Or we can hit the button in the middle in order to jump between different terrain modes. So each mode will do something different there. Do we want to play with our traction and stability control all across the board? Do we want to have it focusing on more economical driving? Do we want it to really redline and give us a more sporty performance? So I personally love this mode. It is phenomenal. If we're towing, we're probably going to want to be in our eco mode instead. But I mean, the mode that you're in is going to depend what's currently going on. Off to the side, we've got our downhill brake control, which is going to hold us at a set speed as we go downhill. We can turn our park sensing system on or off. Auto hold, that's the one that's potentially going to kill power to the engine if we're stopped for an extended period of time. We've got our 360 camera, so either just generic backup camera, or we can look at different 360 views as well. From there, the buttons that are here are going to depend on the Palisade that you've got, but we've got a heated steering wheel, heated first row seats for driver passenger, ventilated first row seats for driver and passenger as well. So it is really nice, but I really, really love the look of the center stack here. It looks really, really sharp. But one other thing to show you, look at this. Here we go. So we've got this little button here that we can push, and when we do, bam! All right, so as you can see there, let's brighten you up a tiny little bit. But we do have a USB power point. There is the option for a wireless charge pad. So depending on which version of the vehicle that you're in, you might have a wireless charge pad available. We also do have these two little buttons here. So we've got the option of adjusting what's going on with our cup holders there. So it is kind of cool that we've got that available as an option. I love it the way that it looks. This single button press, really, really straightforward, but really nice all at the same time. And then we also do have, when we're in that highest trim, so the calligraphy or ultimate calligraphy, a head-up display. So this specific one, because we're in the urban version of the vehicle, doesn't have that HUD, but it is available there as an option. Now, a few other things to point out. We've got a little armrest that's got a removable tray. Inside there, we've got two power points. So we've got a USB-C as well as a traditional 12-volt power point there too. Really, really nice. Oh, all right, other things to point out. Just underneath, so when we go underneath the center stack, we've got a few more power points. So we've got a 12-volt power point as well as another USB-C power point. So what was that? So two USB-C, and then we've got a USB. And then even in our seats, we've got our USB power points there too. So power all over the place inside of this thing. Shooting along the side, we do have a little glove box there, which has a fairly unique look to the way that the switch works. It's kind of cool. Up overhead from there, we've got an auto-dimming rear view mirror. We've got our garage door opening buttons there that we can turn on off as necessary. From there, we've also got like a little convex mirror so we can see what's going on behind us. So you got kids arguing, fighting, whatever the case may be. We can drop that in order to see what's going on back there. And one really cool thing, through this media screen, we have something called passenger talk. It's essentially like a car intercom system. So what'll happen is it'll pick up the front microphones and shoot that audio to the back so you can talk to your kids if they're kind of driving you a little bit crazy. Look a little bit. You've got that option, which is kind of cool. Overhead from there, we've got our SOS and our tow mode. We've got our interior light control. And then depending on the version of the vehicle you're in, you're either going to have this smaller sunroof or a fully panoramic sunroof. So it's going to stretch across the entire part of the vehicle instead. That one looks really sharp. Not saying this one doesn't, but it's nice that we've at least got a little sunroof there. We could, let there be light, open this thing up very easily, pause it part way, etc. We can drop it. And then when it's fully closed, we also do have the option of lifting up if we want to vent it out instead. So we can either vent it out or we can just fully open it up instead. So you've got some options there, which is definitely a nice thing. Now, other things to point out, we've got our visor, little business card holder with a vanity mirror that has a built-in light that turns on or off as you're sliding this open. And then the visor also extends out to block all of the sun, which I love. All right, second row time. So this is equally as impressive. Now, one thing you might notice, this thing has a shade built in. So really, really cool. I love it. More and more cars are having this thing built in, and I think it's just brilliant. So having that shade, really good. You've got sleeping kids, you're afraid of the light, you've got a teenager that needs to huddle in darkness. You've got that available as an option. But the second row seats inside of this thing, equally as comfortable as the first row. Oh, this is really nice. This is really nice. Now, one cool thing. So the seats, we can slide them forwards, backwards as necessary. So if we need to create more space for that third row, we've got that flexibility. But it is really nice back here. The same kind of base look and layout we've got for the first row follows through to the second. So we've got that nice metallic look along the door there, a little speaker. We've got our window control, a little door handle. We've got some cup holders there too, which is fantastic. And then down below, we've got a little bottle holder. From there, behind the first and row seats, we also do have our first and row. Behind the first row seats, we've also got some pockets there for driver passenger side, which is great. We've got some USB power points along the inner part of both first row seats on top of that, which is fantastic. The second row seats, like they're so comfortable. But I mean, like up overhead with me being 6 feet tall, I've got, 4.5 inches of headspace here, which is crazy. I love that we can also adjust the seat so we can recline them if we need. Oh yes, look at that recline. Oh, that is really comfortable. If you didn't have people in the third row, I would absolutely be driving with like this. Oh, that's really comfortable. All right, so lots of space back here, which is great. The seats are super comfortable. We've even got these like kind of neat little pockets along the inside here that we're gonna find when we get the dual captain's chairs set up instead. Now, from there, we've also got this little control, which is going to be for our climate back here. And so that essentially does make it a tri-zone climate control. So we've got our dual zone in the front and then control for the back here. We've got heated second row seats. So heated second row, optional ventilated second row, and I did mention it, optional heated third row, which is like mind-blowing. But all of the controls we can do right through the back here. If you've got kids that are driving you nuts, you could also toggle it off so they can't use this system anymore. But we do also have a 12-volt power point back here. So traditional cigarette lighter adapter is back there as well. Now, seat and configuration wise, we've got the option for either a 7 or an 8-seat configuration. Now this one, obviously, 7-seat configuration because we don't have the bench seat. But when we get the bench seat, it doesn't matter which trim level of the vehicle that you're in, that middle seat is never going to be heated. So it's strictly going to be the outboard seats for that heated ventilated option. They're never going to have that middle seat heated whatsoever. But whether you decide to go for this seating configuration or if you want to go for the 8-seat is going to depend on what you personally need out of your vehicle. Because if you just need more space and you only need technically a 4 or 5-seater, getting the bench could be useful. And then you can easily just fold down that third row if you need like gear for hockey and things like that. I personally am a bigger fan of the 7-seater to get in and out in order to get to that third row. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible to get into the third row with the bench seat. One cool thing about these seats, did I just lock myself in? No. Child locks are on this door. Hold on. I've got child locks on this door right now. Okay, hold on. Child locks. Hilarious. All right. So in order to get into the third row seats, obviously if you have the pass through, you can just walk through that middle seat there. Super simple. But we also do have 2 individual buttons. So we've got one right along the outside of the seat down low, and we push that in order to be able to jump into the back here. And then if you're in the back and you need to get out, there's a button along the very top. So we push that, and same idea. We power fold, and just like that, we're inside the third row. So it's not challenging at all to get into the third row of this thing. So whether you've got the pass through in the middle here, or if you've got to push the buttons in order to be able to move the seat forward. So, I mean, spacing wise, there actually is like a surprising amount of space in the third row. Now, I've got the passenger first row, passenger second row seat set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall. So that would be me comfortably being able to sit in both seats. Now, if I fling myself across the side here into this third row seat, it's a tiny bit tight. So, I mean, I could technically move my knees a little bit, but using that bar between the legs, I would probably try to get this second row person to move their seat forward a tiny little bit. But I mean, at the end of the day, the third row seats are actually still, same thing, surprisingly comfortable. Like, could you fit 3 full versions of me into the third row? Probably not, but at least 2 full-size versions of me, absolutely. And then one cool thing, we've got all of our anchor points back here too. So our anchor points in the third row, anchor points in the second row, and all of our necessary tethers. So if you've got front-facing, rear-facing child seats, you're not going to have an issue in the second or the third row whatsoever, which is fantastic. But I mean, I've got a boatload of knee space here, which is kind of nice. Like, I mean, it is nicer because this is the bench seat. So, I mean, I could technically just like kick my legs out in the middle seat if I absolutely had to, which is nice. But I mean, even if you didn't pull the seat all the way back, I mean, it still leaves a boatload of space back here, which is fantastic. Now, one cool thing, with the third row seats, I did mention we've got the option for heated third row, but we've got some USB-C power points back here, and we've got this handy little button that lets us recline the seat a little bit. So we can bring it forwards, backwards a tiny little bit, which is really nice. We've got a 60-40 bench split back here. So if you want to kind of lay back a tiny little bit, you've got that as an option. I was like, you've got like a little seatbelt overhead here. It's for the middle seat there. But I mean, let's say if I had to sit in this seat, upright, I've got like about what? Maybe an inch, actually. If I'm fully upright, that's actually not too bad. Not too shabby. I've got almost 3 inches of headspace in the third row. So it is really, really nice to know that if you need the space inside of this thing, you will absolutely have it all across the board. It's phenomenal the amount of space inside of this thing. Filling up fuel inside of the Palisade, also straightforward. Just by our driver's side, we've got a capped system. So it's non-locked and it's also capped. So if you're concerned with fuel theft and things like that, you could technically look at an aftermarket cap that's got a lock on it. So there are a ton of options available there. But I mean, just insert regular 87 octane and you're pretty much good to go. And that's one of the great things is that in the majority of Hyundai vehicles, just regular 87 fuel is all you need to use. And that's also going to depend on where you are geographically too, because if you're in Europe, chances are good you're probably looking at a 95 as your minimum. So as long as you're hitting that minimum 87 octane, you're good to go. But inside of this thing, it does have pretty good performance and good fuel economy all at the same time. Towards the back end of the Palisade, it looks fairly sharp. We've got a little spoiler over top. We've got our rear windshield wiper, backup camera, our reverse sensing system on top of that. So again, this thing is loaded with technology. It's kind of crazy. We've got a power liftgate as well, which is great. Now, one thing, we also do have a hitch or towing prep package that we can get right from the factory as well, which is fantastic. When we look at towing inside the Palisade, minimum amount that you're going to be able to pull is 1,650 pounds if you're pulling a trailer without brakes. But if you've got a trailer with brakes, you're looking at 5,000 pound towing capacity, which is pretty dang good for a vehicle this size with the engine that it's got. But it is nice. So you're pulling a small trailer, things like that. You're going to be covered off inside of this thing, which is great. But we've got our nice Palisade badge along the back there, Hyundai badge with our H-Track badge there on top of that. We could just make it out right on the very bottom, but we are going to be a dual tip exhaust as well, and the tips look kind of nice. One other thing, just underneath the vehicle, that's where we're going to find our spare tire. So if we ever want to change the tire ourselves because we popped it, just underneath with our jack stand, just right in the back of the cargo area there on top of that. But speaking of which, let's have a peek in the cargo area. All right, so I've got the cargo dimensions for the Palisade showing up right now. And as you can see there, we actually have a decent amount of space specifically for the back cargo area by itself. But one really cool thing about the Palisade is that we also do have power third row seats, and then we can also release our second row seat. So third row is power up and down. Second row is going to be a power release, all from the back. It's kind of cool. So we've got a series of different buttons along the side, and we can lower down the left or the right side independently. Along the side here, all we're going to do is push. And down it goes. Super simple, but look at how that opens things up from a cargo perspective. So a lot more space there. And then as you saw, it's a 60-40 split. So 60 on the left, 40 on the right side on top of that. And then from the back, we can also press in order to drop down that second row seat. So it is fantastic. We've got that flexibility. And then obviously you can see in between there, I did mention we do have either the bench seat or the dual captain's chair. So either a 7 or 8 seat configuration, just depending on what you need out of your ride. But it is nice. So ton more space, a lot more depth when we've got both rows folded down. And I did mention it, we could also power lift up this third row seat instead, which is fantastic. Now, third row is back up power, which is great. But one thing, we do have to manually lift this back up. And one interesting thing, you might be able to see a slight separation difference between both sides. And that's because we can also slightly recline these things on top of that, which is cool. We've got some base controls back here, better controls in that third row as well, which is kind of cool. Actually taking a look at the cargo area, we've got this like cool protector that goes all the way through, and it is Velcro on top of that. So it is cool that we've got this as an option. But lifting this thing up, we've got a few things. So we've got our jack stand off to the right side. We've also got all of our releases and things like that for the stand itself there as well. Little cargo net. And then you might also be able to make out, we've got our little cargo shade. So we do have a few pieces that are cut out inside of the third row. So if we wanted to use that cargo shield, we could, just folding down the third row, and then it's spring loaded. So we can easily take this thing out in order to insert it both sides. Again, spring loaded to do it, which is fantastic. But I love it. I did mention, so we're gonna find our spare tire just underneath the vehicle on top of that. And then a few small things to point out in the third row. We've got some cargo hooks along the bottom there, so bottom top. And then along the other side where we can find all of our different seat lowering buttons, we're also going to find a 12-volt power point back there. A little bit of a test drive inside of the 2023. Oh, I love the screen. Look at this. Look at this. Oh, it's so dang cool. So it will go away once you start driving a little bit too fast, but having that is such a cool feature. That is such a cool feature. Oh, I love it. I'm like a child right now.
4.9.
Amazing band. The song is fantastic, but the reason why it sounds so good is because this thing's got an upgraded Harman Kardon sound system. So the Palisade in general has a few different options for sound, and the Harman Kardon is incredible. But the one thing I still can't get over, this thing's got a blind spot monitor. So inside of the cluster, we can see what's going on in our blind spot on both sides. It's phenomenal. And like, watch this power. Ready? Sport mode! So good. I love my different modes. So like sport mode here, it's gonna rev the RPMs up a little bit higher. So it just gives it like an infinitely nicer performance. Like it's gonna rev the RPMs, let them go higher. Gives it a really nice feel. All right. And here we go. Ajax Genesis. So I mentioned it earlier, so the Ajax Hyundai dealership is currently under construction. So at the Genesis dealership, that's where you're gonna find these guys for now. But phenomenal car, phenomenal system. But that is the 2023 Palisade. What did you think? But if you enjoyed this one, thumbs up, share it with your social networks. And until I see you next time, take care. And one thing I love about this ride, I feel like I want to use the force right now. After you release. Try that again. So all we do is push. I guess it helps if I press the right button.